So you've run the numbers, probably more than once, right? And on paper, the move actually works. The payment fits, the savings are there, and the plan doesn't really blow anything up. But even with all that, something still doesn't quite feel right. It's not full-on panic, and it's not some big red flag you can point to. It's just this quiet little pushback that shows up anyway. And that can be pretty unsettling. You trust the math and you've done your homework, so why don't you feel settled yet? Eventually, you start looking inward and asking yourself, if I can actually afford this, why am I hesitating? That question carries a lot more weight than it seems to at first. You aren't really asking for more spreadsheets or more math. You're asking whether that hesitation is something you need to listen to or if it's just something you need to move through. Here's the thing about financial clarity. It usually solves one problem only to expose another. It answers the question of whether a move can work, but it doesn't tell you if it feels right for you right now. Money can show you what's possible, but it can't tell you what it's actually like to live with that decision once the boxes are unpacked and that early excitement starts to fade. I see this happen all the time. Someone plans ahead, stays disciplined, and doesn't stretch themselves too thin. Then, finally, the numbers line up exactly how they hoped. But instead of feeling relieved, you know what shows up? Pressure. Because once the math isn't the obstacle anymore, the decision feels a lot more exposed. There's nothing outside of you left to point to. No market excuses or budget constraints. It's just you and your choice. So let me just say this plainly. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you for feeling this way. Just because you have the finances figured out doesn't mean you're required to feel completely calm. And it certainly doesn't mean you're missing something obvious. When someone says it just doesn't feel like the right time, even they don't always know exactly what that means. But usually that one sentence is carrying a few different concerns all at once. Part of it might still be about the money, but not in a spreadsheet kind of way. It's more about the idea of letting go of a payment you know for one you don't, even if that new one works perfectly on paper. Another part often has nothing to do with dollars at all. It's about the fear of choosing wrong and then having to live with it. You've probably noticed how housing decisions feel permanent in a way most other choices don't. You can't just quietly undo them if things don't go how you hoped. And that sense of permanence adds a lot of weight. And here's something people don't always expect. When moving becomes optional instead of a necessity, it can actually feel harder. When you had to move, the path was clear. But when you don't have to, the whole decision sits squarely on your shoulders, and that can feel heavier than you imagined. At this stage, the hesitation usually isn't about whether you can afford the move. It's really about what you don't want to give up. Sometimes it's your stability. Sometimes it's your flexibility. Maybe it's just a version of life you've gotten really good at handling. In the end, even a good change means letting go of something that is currently working for you. For some of us, the pause is about avoiding regret. Not some big dramatic regret, just those quiet thoughts you fear might pop up years later, like maybe life would have been simpler if we'd just stayed. For others, it's simply about avoiding disruption. We know moves take a ton of energy, focus, and emotional bandwidth. Even when the outcome is great, the process itself can feel like a lot to carry. None of this automatically means your hesitation is a warning sign. It just means you're taking the decision seriously. And when something feels this personal, it makes total sense to slow down and check your footing. Not all risk feels the same. Financial risk is easy to see because you can track it in payments, balances, and timelines. But emotional risk, that's much harder to measure. It shows up as uneasiness, second guessing, or that quiet worry about disappointing yourself later on. And here's the tricky part. Emotional risk often feels much louder than financial risk. That doesn't mean the feeling is more accurate though. It just means it's harder to quantify. When people talk about trusting their gut, they're often just reacting to that difference without even realizing it. What makes it even more complicated is that discomfort and danger don't feel the same, but they can sound pretty similar in your head. Discomfort is asking you to look a little closer, while danger is telling you to step back. Usually, telling the difference takes time, not pressure. There's a lot of advice out there about trusting your intuition, but that phrase can get oversimplified. That inner voice isn't just one thing. Sometimes it's your past experience quietly noticing something that doesn't quite line up. Other times, it's just a natural resistance to change, speaking in a very convincing tone. The goal isn't to shut that voice down, but it's not to blindly follow it either. It's about understanding what it's actually reacting to. Is it pointing to a real trade-off you haven't named yet? Or is it just reacting to the weight of making a big decision that can't be easily undone? One helpful way to look at it is this. Does the hesitation bring you clarity or just tension? Clarity steadies you, even if it leads to a tough realization. Tension, on the other hand, tends to just circle around, replaying the same doubts without actually adding anything new. Getting clear on what's underneath this feeling really matters, mostly because it shapes how you live with the decision either way. If you move without addressing that feeling, the unease can follow you right into the new place. And if you stay without naming it, the question can just sit quietly in the background longer than you'd expect. Neither outcome is a failure. The real difference is whether the choice feels intentional, like something you did on purpose, or just something you've drifted into. Most people carry a lot less weight when they understand why they decided, even if the decision itself wasn't an easy one. It's completely okay if this doesn't resolve neatly right this second. You're allowed to sit with it. You don't have to rush towards certainty just because the numbers say you can. Sometimes the better question isn't even, should we move? It's, what am I really trying to hold on to here? Some people find it helpful to write this out privately, not to force a final answer, but just to separate what's factual from what's felt. Tools like the 5-step Move Decision Worksheet exist for exactly that reason. They aren't there to push you one way or the other, they just give your thinking a place to land. And as you keep turning this over, you might notice your attention shifting toward what staying or moving could cost you over time. Not just in dollars, but in your energy, your focus, and your opportunity. That's just the next layer of the same conversation. And usually, it shows up once the initial fear settles down enough for you to look a little further down the road.